The hunting grounds of Carnethia were supposed to be sacred, untouchable, a place where the galaxy's apex predators came to prove themselves against creatures that could shred starship hulls with their bare claws. So naturally, when the human showed up, everyone assumed she was lunch. Attention, unregistered life form. Karach's translator crackled across the arena floor. His massive frame, all 7 feet of scaled muscle and ceremonial battle armor, turned toward the small figure standing at the entrance gate. You have violated restricted territory. Identify yourself before summary execution. The human didn't run, didn't even flinch. She just stood there, maybe 5.5 feet tall, wearing what looked like tactical gear held together with spite and duct tape. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple tail, and her eyes, those eyes were scanning the arena like she was shopping for groceries, not staring down a Vorkon warlord and his hunting party. "My name's Dakota Reeves," she said, her voice carrying across the sand with unsettling calm. "And I'm here to file a noise complaint." Karach's crest flared purple with confusion. Behind him, his 3 lieutenants shifted uneasily. They'd been tracking the Great Alpha, a territorial beast that had killed 17 hunters this cycle alone. The last thing they needed was some lost human wandering into their kill zone. "A noise complaint?" Karach repeated, his mandibles clicking with what might have been laughter. "You interrupted a sacred hunt to complain about noise?" "Well, yeah." Dakota pulled out a small device, tapping at its screen. "See, I'm trying to conduct geological surveys about 3 clicks north of here, and there's been this constant roaring and screaming for the past 6 hours. Real disruptive. So I figured I'd come down here and ask you folks to keep it down." One of Karach's lieutenants, a young warrior named Threshold, actually laughed. It was a mistake. The sound echoed across the arena, and somewhere in the distant rock formations, something massive shifted. The ground trembled. "Oh, fantastic," Dakota muttered, still looking at her device. "You woke it up. Do you people have any idea how hard it is to get stable seismic readings when there's a Class 4 predator stomping around?" Karach's blood went cold. Not from fear, mind you. His thermal scans hadn't picked up anything, which meant the creature had learned to mask its heat signature. Smart. Dangerously smart. "Human," Karach said slowly, activating his plasma lance. "You need to leave. Now. That thing will tear you apart before you can blink." Dakota looked up from her device, one eyebrow raised. "The big lizard thing with the acid spit and the retractable claws?" "Yeah, I've seen it. Passed it on the way here. Seemed pretty chill, actually." "You passed it?" Threshold's voice cracked slightly. "Sure. It was napping in this cave system about half a click east. Didn't want to disturb it, so I went around." She paused, tilting her head. "Wait, are you guys hunting that thing? Because, I gotta tell you, that seems like a terrible idea." The roar that split the air made Dakota's previous noise complaint seem quaint by comparison. It was the sound of fury condensed into pure sonic violence, a challenge that made the arena's ancient walls shudder. Karach had heard that roar in his nightmares since the hunt began. The Great Alpha had arrived. It emerged from the northern canyon like a nightmare given flesh. 20 feet of armored hide, muscles that rippled like tectonic plates, and teeth designed by evolution's cruelest engineer. Its eyes, 6 of them arranged in a semicircle across its skull, all locked onto the hunting party with hungry intelligence. "Battle formation!" Karach bellowed, his warriors spreading out with practiced efficiency. Plasma weapons hummed to life. Energy shields flickered into existence. This was it. The moment they'd been training for. The Alpha roared again, closer now, and Karach could smell the ozone tang of its acid glands preparing to fire. "Run, human!" he shouted over his shoulder, not looking back, every sense focused on the approaching death machine. Dakota's response was so quiet, he almost missed it. "I don't run," she said, her voice carrying an edge that made Karach's scales itch. "I end hunts." Before he could process that statement, Dakota walked past him. Not ran. Walked. Her hands were empty, no weapons visible, no armor worth mentioning. She was either the bravest being he'd ever encountered, or the stupidest. Karach was leaning toward stupid. The Alpha saw her. Of course it did. Its 6 eyes tracked her movement with predatory focus, its massive head lowering to get a better look at this tiny morsel that dared approach. "Hey there, big guy," Dakota called out, stopping about 30 feet from the creature. "Remember me? We met earlier. I was the one doing the ground scans near your cave." The Alpha's response was to open its mouth, revealing rows of serrated teeth and the telltale green glow of acid building in its throat. Yeah, very impressive," Dakota continued, completely ignoring the imminent death heading her way. "Listen, I need you to do me a favor. See those guys behind me? The ones with the glowy sticks and the fancy armor? They've been making a ton of noise all day, and it's really messing with my work. Think you could maybe chase them off? I'd really appreciate it." Karach couldn't believe what he was hearing. The human was trying to negotiate with a great Alpha. That wasn't how this worked. That wasn't how any of this worked. The Alpha seemed equally confused. Its attack posture wavered, head tilting slightly, as if trying to understand this bizarre little creature that smelled wrong and acted wronger. Then it lunged. What happened next would be debated in Vorkon military academies for decades. Dakota moved, not with the jerky panic of prey, but with the fluid precision of something that had done this before. She sidestepped the Alpha's charge by maybe 6 inches, her hand reaching out to tap the creature's flank as it thundered past. The Alpha skidded to a halt, confused. It had never missed before. Never. Prey didn't dodge like that. Prey didn't move with that kind of calculated efficiency. It spun around, faster than something that size had any right to move, and tried again. Jaws wide, claws extended, every weapon in its biological arsenal deployed. Dakota ducked under the first swipe, rolled past the second, and somehow ended up standing on the Alpha's back. She looked down at Karach, her expression one of mild annoyance. "See, this is exactly what I'm talking about," she said, balancing perfectly as the Alpha bucked and thrashed beneath her. "How am I supposed to get any work done with all this racket?" The Alpha, apparently deciding that conventional attacks weren't working, did something Karach had only seen once before. It rolled, the entire massive bulk of it, rolling like a log to crush whatever was on its back. Dakota jumped clear, landed in a crouch, and finally, pulled out a weapon. Except it wasn't a weapon. It was a small aerosol can. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Threshold whispered beside Karach. Dakota sprayed the can in the Alpha's direction. A fine mist caught the light, shimmering in the air between predator and human. The Alpha, mid-charge, hit the cloud and immediately started sneezing. Violent, explosive sneezes that sent it stumbling backward. "Capsaicin compound," Dakota explained to no one in particular. "Tuned to the specific chemoreceptors in Carnethian megafauna. Completely harmless, just really annoying. Kind of like this whole situation, actually." The Alpha's eyes were watering, all 6 of them. It shook its massive head, trying to clear the irritant, and when it looked back at Dakota, something had changed. The predatory focus was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Respect? Caution? Fear? "Now," Dakota said, walking toward the beast again. "Are we going to do this the easy way, or do I need to get the air horn?" The Alpha backed up. actually backed up. Karach watched in stunned silence as the galaxy's most feared predator retreated from a human holding a spray can and making vague threats about air horns. "That's what I thought," Dakota muttered. She turned to Karach and his hunting party, who were all standing frozen in various states of shock. "Okay, here's the deal. I need quiet. You guys need to not get eaten. How about you take your sacred hunt somewhere else, and I don't tell the local conservation authority that you're harassing protected wildlife?" "Protected?" Karach found his voice, though it came out higher than intended. "That thing has killed 17 warriors." "Yeah, well, maybe they shouldn't have been stomping around its territory making a bunch of noise," Dakota shot back. "The great alphas are territorial, sure, but they're not aggressive unless provoked. Which, by the way, you've been doing for 6 hours straight." Threschel stepped forward, his pride apparently overriding his survival instincts. "You dare lecture us? We are Vorkon hunters. We have tracked and killed prey across 100 worlds." Dakota looked at him. Just looked. And somehow, that look carried more threat than the alpha's roar. "Kid," she said slowly, "I've been doing ecological surveys in hostile environments since before you were hatched. I've tagged creatures that make your alpha look like a house pet. I've stared down things that don't even have names in your language because they exist in dimensional spaces your species hasn't discovered yet. So when I tell you to take your hunt somewhere else, it's not a lecture. It's professional advice, which you're welcome to ignore. But then I can't help what happens next." "And what would happen next?" Karach asked, genuinely curious now. Dakota smiled. "Well, I'd have to call my supervisor and explain why my survey is behind schedule. And she'd ask why. And I'd have to tell her about you guys. And then she'd have to file a report with the Galactic Conservation Council. And then they'd send inspectors. And then you'd have to explain why you were hunting on a protected reserve without proper permits. And then there'd be hearings, and fines, and probably criminal charges. Or," she paused, "you could just leave. Your choice." Karach looked at his warriors, looked at the alpha, which was still eyeing Dakota with wary respect, looked at this tiny human who had somehow turned his sacred hunt into a bureaucratic nightmare. "We'll relocate," he said finally. "Smart choice," Dakota replied, turning back to her device. "There's a nice hunting ground about 10 clicks south. Plenty of Class 2 predators, all properly tagged for recreational hunting, should be right up your alley." As Karach and his party began their retreat, Threschel couldn't help himself. "What are you? Really?" Dakota looked up, genuine confusion on her face. "I'm a geological surveyor. I literally told you that when I got here. Were you not listening? But you. That thing. How? Oh, the alpha?" Dakota glanced at the creature, which was now settling down on the sand, watching her with those 6 eyes. "Yeah, we're cool. I helped remove a parasitic infection from its ear canal yesterday. Nasty little burrowers. Very painful. Probably why it was so cranky with you guys, actually." Karach felt something inside him break. Some fundamental understanding of how the universe worked, just gone. "You treated it?" he managed. "Part of the job." Dakota shrugged. "Can't get good seismic data if the local megafauna are distressed. Throws off all the readings. Basic fieldwork protocol." They left. The mighty Vorkon hunting party, veterans of 1,000 conflicts, retreated from a human with a spray can and a bad attitude. As they climbed back toward their ship, Threschel looked at Karach. "Commander, what just happened?" Karach was quiet for a long moment. "Then, we encountered a human doing her job. And we were in the way." "That's it? That's your analysis?" "What more do you need?" Karach asked. "We've all heard the stories about humans. How they're weak, fragile. How they have no natural weapons, no armor, no adaptations for survival. And yet somehow they're everywhere, surveying the most dangerous planets, researching the most hostile environments, living in places that would kill any of us in minutes. My point, Cratch said, looking back at the arena where Dakota was setting up her equipment while the great Alpha dozed peacefully nearby, is that maybe we've been asking the wrong question? It's not, how do humans survive? It's, how does anything survive humans? Back in the arena, Dakota finished calibrating her seismic sensors, completely unaware of the existential crisis she'd triggered in the hunting party. The Alpha, satisfied that the noisy intruders were gone, had curled up in a sunny spot and was making a sound that might have been purring. Finally, Dakota muttered, checking her readings. Peace and quiet. The ground chose that moment to rumble. Not from the Alpha, from something deeper, something bigger. Dakota's eyes widened as she looked at her sensors. Oh no. No. Please tell me that's not what I think it is. The Alpha's eyes snapped open. It lifted its head, nostrils flaring, and made a sound Dakota had never heard before. Not a roar. A whimper. Oh, come on, Dakota groaned. The survey report said the greater Alpha was hibernating for another 3 months. The ground cracked. Sand began to pour into a widening sinkhole, and from deep below, something vast and ancient began to wake. Dakota grabbed her emergency beacon, looked at the Alpha, and made a decision she'd probably regret. Okay, big guy, she said to the creature. New deal. You help me not die in the next 10 minutes, and I'll make sure those hunters never bother you again. Sound good? The Alpha looked at her, looked at the growing sinkhole, looked back at her. Then it lowered its head, and Dakota understood. She climbed aboard, gripping the armored plates as the creature stood. This is definitely not in my job description, she muttered, as the Alpha began to run. Behind them, the ground collapsed entirely, and something that made the great Alpha look like a house pet began to emerge. Dakota's day was about to get a whole lot louder. The thing that emerged from beneath Carnithia's hunting grounds didn't just break the ground. It reshaped the entire geological concept of what ground meant. Dakota clung to the Alpha's armored hide as the creature sprinted across shifting sand, each thunderous step synchronized with the rumbling collapse behind them. She risked a glance backward and immediately wished she hadn't. The greater Alpha was everything the surveys had promised. And worse, imagine taking a regular Alpha, feeding it steroids and nightmares for about 3 centuries, then giving it a really bad mood. Now triple that. Its hide was less armor and more mobile fortress, studded with bone protrusions that glowed with bioluminescent fury. Each of its 8 legs was thick as a cargo hauler. And its head, oh sweet mercy, its head had too many things that shouldn't exist on a living creature. Okay, think, Dakota shouted over the wind, whipping past her face. Greater Alphas are subterranean. They hate surface activity, which means something forced it up early. The creature behind them roared, and the sound physically hurt. Dakota's teeth rattled. Her equipment beeped angrily, several sensors just giving up and dying on the spot. The smaller Alpha beneath her changed direction suddenly, nearly throwing Dakota off. It was heading toward the canyon system, the same network of caves where it had been napping earlier. Bad idea, Dakota yelled. We'll be trapped! The Alpha ignored her, which was fair because Dakota was just cargo at this point. They plunged into the canyon entrance, darkness swallowing them whole. Dakota activated her helmet light, the beam cutting through shadows that seemed unusually thick. Behind them, the greater Alpha hit the canyon entrance and stopped. Just stopped. Its massive bulk blocked out the sunlight entirely, but it didn't follow. The smaller Alpha slowed to a trot, then a walk, finally stopping in a wide cavern. Dakota slid off its back, legs shaky, heart doing things hearts weren't designed to do. "Why'd it stop?" she asked, more to herself than the Alpha. Her scientific brain was already working the problem. Territorial boundary. No, greater alphas don't respect boundaries. Environmental factor? Maybe. Light sensitivity? Possible but unlikely given the bioluminescence. Unless. She pulled out her functioning scanner, the one that had somehow survived the chaos. The readings made her pause. "Pheromone markers," she breathed. "You've been marking this entire cave system. These aren't just tunnels. This is your nursery." The Alpha moved deeper into the cave, and Dakota followed, curiosity overriding common sense. Each one roughly the size of her torso, arranged in careful patterns across the cavern floor. The shells had that same bioluminescent quality, pulsing gently with inner light. "Oh," Dakota said softly, "you're not aggressive, you're a parent." The Alpha settled near the eggs, watching Dakota with those 6 eyes. There was intelligence there. Not human intelligence, but something older. Something that understood protection and territory, and the basic math of survival. Outside, the greater Alpha roared again. Closer. Testing the boundaries. Dakota's scanner beeped. Seismic activity was spiking. The greater Alpha was digging. Of course it was digging. Because today couldn't get any simpler. "Right," Dakota muttered, pacing the cavern. "Think. What do I know about greater alphas? They're apex predators. They're territorial. They hibernate in deep geothermal vents. They emerge when—" She stopped, looked at her scanner, looked at the eggs, looked at the readings again. "When food sources spike," she finished. "The eggs. It can sense the eggs. Protein concentration must be off the charts." The Alpha made a low sound, almost questioning. "Your kids are basically sending out a dinner bell to everything with chemoreceptors in a 50-click radius," Dakota explained. "And that thing out there just woke up hungry after months of hibernation." The ground shook. The greater Alpha was getting closer. Dakota could hear the scraping of massive claws against stone, the methodical excavation of a creature that had all the time in the world and knew its prey was trapped. Dakota's emergency beacon crackled to life. "Survey Team 7, this is Orbital Command. We're reading massive seismic disturbance at your location. Confirm status." Dakota grabbed the beacon. "Command, this is Reeves. Status is complicated. I need immediate retrieval, and also maybe a tactical strike team, and possibly a xenobiologist, and definitely a better job." Reeves. "Clarify." "Complicated. I'm trapped in a cave with a protective parent, about 50 eggs, and a very large, very angry creature that wants to eat all of us." "How's your day going?" "Static." "Then, retrieval team is 30 minutes out. Can you survive 30 minutes? Dakota looked at the eggs, looked at the Alpha, looked at her dwindling supply of capsaicin spray and her collection of geological survey equipment that was absolutely not designed for combat situations. "I'll get creative," she said. She clicked off the brief beacon and turned to the Alpha. "Okay, here's the situation. I can't fight that thing. You can't fight that thing. But maybe, just maybe, I can annoy it enough to buy us time." The Alpha tilted its head, which Dakota chose to interpret as agreement. "I'm going to need you to trust me," she continued, already pulling equipment from her pack. "And by trust me, I mean don't eat me when this inevitably goes wrong." She had 3 seismic charges, designed for creating controlled microquakes to test substrate composition. Not weapons, definitely not weapons, but in the right configuration, with the right timing, and a healthy amount of desperation. The greater Alpha broke through the cavern wall. It didn't dig around the entrance. It didn't find a weak point. It just smashed through solid rock like it was tissue paper, and suddenly the cavern was full of teeth and rage, and the smell of something that had been sleeping in volcanic vents. Dakota threw the first charge. It stuck to the Greater Alpha's face, right between two of its too many eyes. The creature paused, more confused than hurt. "Hey, ugly!" Dakota shouted. "Bet you can't catch me!" She ran. Not away from the eggs. Toward a side tunnel she'd spotted earlier, narrow enough that the Greater Alpha would have trouble following. The creature lunged. Dakota dove into the tunnel. Behind her, the charge detonated. Not an explosion. A focused seismic pulse that disrupted the Greater Alpha's inner ear balance. The creature stumbled, shook its massive head, and roared fury into the tunnel. Then it started digging again, widening the entrance. Because, of course, it did. Dakota set the second charge on the tunnel ceiling and kept running. Her helmet light bounced wildly, showing glimpses of cave formations that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Behind her, stone cracked and splintered. She emerged into a smaller cavern, this one showing signs of geothermal activity. Steam vents hissed. The air was hot enough to make breathing difficult. The Greater Alpha crashed through behind her, and Dakota triggered the second charge. The tunnel ceiling collapsed. Not completely. Just enough to slow the creature down, buying maybe 45 seconds. Dakota checked her beacon. "Command? Status on that retrieval? 20 minutes out. Reeves, your biosigns are concerning." "Yeah. Being chased by a mobile extinction event will do that," Dakota panted. She was running out of tunnel, running out of options, running out of time. The Greater Alpha burst through the rubble, because apparently physics was just a suggestion to this thing. Dakota threw her last charge. Not at the creature. At the largest steam vent, the explosion ruptured the geothermal seal. Superheated steam blasted upward, filling the cavern with scalding vapor. The Greater Alpha reeled back, its heat-sensitive organs overwhelmed. It wasn't hurt, but it was blind. Temporarily. Dakota didn't waste the opportunity. She ran back toward the main cavern, lungs burning, legs screaming. She burst through the entrance to find the smaller Alpha standing guard over the eggs, watching her with what might have been respect. "Move the eggs!" Dakota shouted. "We need to relocate now!" The Alpha didn't move. Of course, it didn't move. These were its children, its territory. Moving meant vulnerability. "Listen to me," Dakota said, approaching slowly, despite every survival instinct screaming at her to keep running. "That thing will kill you. It will destroy the eggs. But if we move them now, together, we can save them. I have a ship coming. Transport. Safety. But you have to trust me." The Greater Alpha's roar echoed through the tunnels. Getting closer. Always closer. The Alpha looked at Dakota, looked at the eggs, made a decision that probably went against every instinct in its considerable arsenal. It started moving eggs, carrying them two at a time in its massive jaws, gentle despite the urgency. Dakota grabbed what she could, her arms burning with the weight. The eggs were warm, pulsing with life that deserved a chance to exist. They worked in frantic harmony, predator and prey, united by the basic mathematics of survival. 10 eggs relocated. 20. 30. The Greater Alpha entered the main cavern. Time slowed. Dakota saw it happening in crystalline clarity. The creature's attention locked onto the remaining eggs. Its jaws opened. Decision made. Dakota did something spectacularly stupid. She stepped between the Greater Alpha and the eggs, arms spread, a 5-foot-nothing human facing down a creature that could swallow her whole without noticing. Just no. The Greater Alpha paused, not from fear, from confusion. This tiny thing, this fragile morsel, was challenging it. The audacity was so unexpected that the creature actually stopped to process it. "These eggs are under my protection," Dakota continued, her voice steady despite everything. "Recognized by Galactic Conservation Act, Section 7, Subsection 4. Any creature that harms them will be classified as a hostile entity, subject to orbital sanction." The Greater Alpha had no idea what those words meant, but Dakota said them with such absolute conviction that the creature hesitated. That hesitation saved lives. The retrieval ship punched through the canyon ceiling, combat thrusters screaming, weapons hot. Its spotlights bathed the cavern in harsh white light. The Greater Alpha recoiled, hissing at the sudden brightness. "Reeves, get clear!" The pilot's voice crackled over the speakers. "Negative!" Dakota shouted back. "Do not fire! Repeat, do not fire! We have protected wildlife in the extraction zone." "Are you insane? That thing is Class 5 hostile. It's also a hibernating adult responding to food stimuli. Stand down!" The Greater Alpha, faced with bright lights, loud noises, and a human who apparently had zero sense of self-preservation, made a choice. It turned and retreated back into the tunnels, presumably to find somewhere quieter to finish its interrupted hibernation. Dakota watched it go, then collapsed onto the cavern floor, every muscle turning to liquid. The smaller Alpha approached, nudged her gently with its snout. Dakota laughed, slightly hysterical. "Yeah, we did good. Your kids are safe." The retrieval team extracted them all. Dakota, the Alpha, and 47 eggs. The ship's xenobiologist spent the entire flight back to orbit, alternating between fascination and terror. "You bonded with a great Alpha," he kept repeating. "That's not supposed to be possible." "Yeah, well," Dakota muttered, wrapped in a thermal blanket and drinking something that was supposedly coffee but tasted like regret. "Tell that to her. She's the one who decided I was acceptable company." Cratch and his hunting party watched from their ship as the retrieval vessel departed. Threshold stood beside his commander, both of them processing what they'd witnessed through long-range scanners. "The human saved them," Threshold said quietly. "The Alpha, the eggs, all of them." Cratch nodded slowly. "She told us she ends hunts. We thought she meant she finishes them, completes them, but she meant she stops them," Threshold finished. "She doesn't hunt, she protects." "Humans," Cratch said, watching the retrieval ship disappear into the atmosphere. "They're not predators, they're not prey. They're something else entirely. Something we don't have words for." 3 weeks later, Dakota's survey report was filed. The hunting grounds of Carnethia were officially reclassified as a protected breeding zone. The Great Alpha and her offspring were relocated to a secure reserve. The Greater Alpha was tagged and monitored, its hibernation patterns now part of an ongoing research study. Dakota received a commendation. She also received a formal complaint from Karach's hunting guild about disrupting their sacred traditions. She filed both documents in the same drawer and went back to work. Her next assignment was a volcanic moon with aggressive silicon-based life forms. Her supervisor asked if she needed backup. Dakota looked at the mission brief, smiled that same not nice smile, and said, "Nah, I'll be fine," because that's what humans did. They walked into impossible situations, armed with spray cans and survey equipment, and the absolute conviction that everything could be solved with enough stubbornness and creative problem-solving. They didn't run from hunts. They ended them. Usually, by making friends with the things everyone else was trying to kill. Somewhere in the reserve, a Great Alpha watched over her eggs, and when they hatched, she would teach them an important lesson. Not all small creatures were prey. Some were protectors. Some were partners. And some, if you were very lucky, were friends.